Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. David awakes from a restless sleep. His heart raced as he remembered what day it was. Administrative Professionals Day. But this year would be different. After months of secretly cross-dressing at home, he'd finally worked up the courage to share this side of himself with his secretary, Veronica. David's hands trembled slightly as he opened his closet, pushing past the rows of suits and dress shirts to the hidden section in the back. He pulled out a royal blue wrap dress he'd purchased weeks ago for this very occasion. The silky fabric slipped over his head, hugging his body in all the right places. Next came the makeup. David had practiced for hours, watching YouTube tutorials until his technique was passable. Foundation to even out his skin tone, a touch of blush on his cheeks, smoky eyeshadow, and a swipe of red lipstick. He stepped back, examining his reflection. The person staring back was both familiar and foreign. It was still him, but softer, more feminine. The final touches were a pair of nude pumps and a delicate silver necklace. David took a deep breath, steadying his nerves. There was no turning back now. The drive to the office felt surreal. David kept glancing at his reflection in the rearview mirror, hardly believing it was really him. As he pulled into his reserved parking spot, a wave of panic washed over him. What if this was a huge mistake? What if Veronica reacted badly, but it was too late for second thoughts? David grabbed his purse, another new purchase, and stepped out of the car. The click of his heels on the pavement echoed in the quiet parking garage. The elevator ride to the top floor seemed to take an eternity. When the doors finally opened, David plastered on a confident smile and strode towards Veronica's desk. She looked up from her computer, her eyes widening in shock as she took in David's appearance. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Veronica's face broke into a warm smile. "Well, hello there. Are you here for the interview?" David felt a rush of relief at her playful tone. She was going along with it. "Yes, I am," he replied, pitching his voice slightly higher than usual. "I'm here to apply for the position of your secretary." Veronica's eyes twinkled with amusement. "Wonderful! Please, have a seat." She gestured to the chair in front of her desk. "Now, tell me about your qualifications." David sat down, crossing his legs demurely. "Well, I have extensive experience in office management and scheduling. I'm proficient in all the major software programs, and I pride myself on my organizational skills." "Impressive," Veronica nodded, playing along. "And how would you handle a difficult client?" "With patience and professionalism," David answered smoothly. "I believe in always maintaining a calm demeanor, no matter how challenging the situation." Their impromptu role-play continued for several minutes, both of them struggling to keep straight faces. Finally, Veronica leaned back in her chair, a genuine smile spreading across her face. "David, I have to say, you make a very convincing woman, and that dress is absolutely stunning on you." David felt a flush of pleasure at the compliment. "Thank you, Veronica. I was so nervous about this, but you've made me feel completely at ease." "Of course," she replied warmly. "I'm honored that you felt comfortable enough to share this side of yourself with me, and I must say it's quite the creative way to celebrate Administrative Professionals Day." They both laughed, the tension fully broken now. David felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He'd been carrying this secret for so long, and it felt incredible to finally be open about it with someone. "I have something for you," Veronica said, reaching into her desk drawer. She pulled out a small, elegantly wrapped box and handed it to David. He carefully unwrapped it, revealing a velvet jewelry box. Inside was a delicate silver ring adorned with a small blue sapphire. "Oh, Veronica," David breathed. "It's beautiful. You shouldn't have." "Nonsense," she said with a wave of her hand. "You're always so generous with your gifts. It's about time I returned the favor, plus I thought it would go perfectly with your outfit." David slipped the ring onto his finger, admiring how it caught the light. He'd never worn much jewelry as a man, but there was something about the delicate band that made him feel more confident, more complete. "Now," Veronica said, standing up. "I believe you promised me dinner to celebrate. Shall we?" David nodded, gathering his things. As they walked to the elevator, he couldn't help but notice how different it felt to move in a dress and heels. There was a sway to his hips that felt natural, almost freeing. They decided on a small Italian restaurant a few blocks from the office. As they were seated, David couldn't help but feel a thrill of excitement. This was his first time out in public dressed as a woman, and so far no one had given him a second glance. As they perused the menus, a waiter approached their table. "Good evening, ladies," he said with a friendly smile. "Can I start you off with some drinks?" David felt a rush of pleasure at being addressed as a woman. He ordered a glass of white wine, his voice soft and feminine. As they waited for their drinks, David noticed a man at the bar glancing in their direction. He was tall and handsome, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes. When he caught David looking, he smiled and raised his glass in a subtle toast. David felt a flutter in his stomach. Was this man actually flirting with him? The thought was both thrilling and terrifying. Veronica, ever observant, noticed the exchange. "I think you have an admirer," she said with a sly smile. David blushed, ducking his head. "Don't be ridiculous. He's probably just being friendly." But a few minutes later, the man approached their table. "Excuse me, ladies," he said, his voice deep and warm. "I hope I'm not interrupting, but I couldn't help but notice your lovely necklace." He gestured to the silver pendant around David's neck. "My sister is a jewelry designer, and it looks like one of her pieces." David's hand flew to the necklace, his heart racing. "Oh, thank you," he managed to say. "I'm afraid I don't know the designer. It was a gift." The man smiled. "Well, it's beautiful, as is the woman wearing it." He held out his hand. "I'm Roman, by the way." David hesitated for a moment before taking Roman's hand. "I'm Danielle," he said, using the feminine name he'd chosen for himself in his private moments. "And this is my friend, Veronica." Roman shook Veronica's hand as well. "It's a pleasure to meet you both. I don't mean to intrude on your dinner, but I was wondering if I could buy you ladies a drink." David glanced at Veronica, unsure how to respond. She gave him an encouraging nod. "That would be lovely," David said, his voice barely above a whisper. Roman's face lit up. "Wonderful! I'll have the waiter bring them over. Enjoy your meal, ladies." With one last smile at David, he returned to the bar. As soon as he was out of earshot, David let out a shaky breath. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Did that really just happen?" Veronica grinned. "It certainly did. And I must say, Danielle, you handled it beautifully. Roman seems quite taken with you." David felt a mix of emotions swirling inside him. Excitement, fear, and a strange sense of rightness. For the first time in his life, he was being seen and appreciated as the person he felt he truly was inside. Throughout dinner, Roman would occasionally catch David's eye and smile. Each time, David felt that same flutter in his stomach. It was a feeling he hadn't experienced in years, not since his college days when he'd first started questioning his gender identity. As they finished their meal, Roman approached their table once more. "I hope you enjoyed your dinner," he said. "And the drinks." "Very much, thank you," David replied, feeling more confident now. Roman hesitated for a moment, then said, "I know this might be forward of me, but I was wondering if I could get your number, Danielle. I'd love to take you out for coffee sometime." David froze, panic rising in his chest. He glanced at Veronica, who gave him a subtle nod of encouragement. I'm flattered, Roman," David said carefully. "But I'm afraid I can't. It's complicated." Roman's face fell slightly, but he nodded in understanding. "Of course, I respect that. Well, it was lovely meeting you both. Have a wonderful evening." With a final smile, he left the restaurant. As soon as he was gone, David buried his face in his hands. Oh God, what just happened? Veronica reached across the table, gently pulling David's hands away from his face. What happened is that a very attractive man was clearly interested in you, and from what I could see, the feeling was mutual. David shook his head. But it's not real. I'm not really Danielle. I'm just playing dress up. Veronica's expression turned serious. Are you, though? David, I've known you for years, and I've never seen you as comfortable and confident as you've been tonight. This doesn't seem like just playing dress up to me. David was quiet for a long moment, staring down at his hands. The sapphire ring glinted in the candlelight. I don't know what this is, he finally admitted. I've been dressing up in private for years, but I never thought I could actually go out like this, and tonight, for the first time in my life, I feel right. Like I'm finally being seen as who I really am. Veronica squeezed his hand. Have you ever considered that maybe this is who you really are? That maybe David is the costume? David's breath caught in his throat. Of course he'd had those thoughts before. Late at night, alone in his apartment, wearing his feminine clothes and makeup. But he'd always pushed those thoughts away, convinced they were impossible fantasies. I did consider it, he said softly. Years ago in college, I even went to a few support group meetings for transgender individuals. But then I met my ex-wife, and I just pushed it all down, convinced myself it was just a phase. Veronica nodded encouragingly. And how do you feel now? David took a deep breath. Scared, he admitted, but also excited. Like maybe there's a chance I could actually be who I've always felt I was inside. That's beautiful, David, Veronica said, her eyes shining with unshed tears. And I want you to know that no matter what you decide, I'm here for you. Whether you want to keep this as something private, or if you want to explore it further, you have my full support. David felt a wave of emotion wash over him. He'd been so afraid of rejection, of losing his job and his friendships. But here was Veronica, offering nothing but acceptance and support. Thank you, he whispered, wiping away a tear that had escaped. I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but knowing I have your support means everything. They finished their meal in comfortable silence, both lost in thought. As they left the restaurant, David felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of him was sad to say goodbye to Danielle for the night, but another part was excited about the possibilities that lay ahead. So, Veronica said as they reached her car, what's next? David thought for a moment. I think I want to explore this more. Maybe start dressing up more often at home, see how it feels. Veronica nodded approvingly. That sounds like a great first step. And if you ever want to go out again, as Danielle or anyone else, I'm always up for a girls' night out. David laughed, feeling lighter than he had in years. I might just take you up on that. As he watched Veronica drive away, David took a deep breath of the cool night air. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was standing on the brink of something amazing. The future was uncertain, but it was also full of possibility. He glanced down at his dress, smoothing a hand over the silky fabric. Then he straightened his shoulders and walked to his car with confidence, his heels clicking rhythmically on the pavement. Tomorrow, he would go back to being David, the successful businessman. But now he knew that Danielle was there too, waiting for her chance to shine. And someday, maybe sooner than he thought, David would find the courage to let her out for good. As he drove home, David's mind raced with possibilities. He thought about all the times he'd admired women's clothing in store windows, wishing he could try them on. Now, he realized, there was nothing stopping him from building a wardrobe of his own. He also thought about Roman and the way his heart had raced when the handsome stranger had shown interest in him. It had been years since David had felt that kind of attraction, and he wondered if it was because he'd finally allowed himself to be seen as he truly felt inside. When he arrived home, David didn't immediately change out of his feminine attire as he usually did. Instead, he poured himself a glass of wine and sat on his couch, savoring the feeling of the dress against his skin, the weight of the necklace, the unfamiliar but pleasant pressure of the bra. He pulled out his phone and, after a moment's hesitation, began researching local support groups for transgender individuals. He found one that met weekly at a community center not far from his apartment. Their next meeting was in 2 days. David's finger hovered over the Contact Us button. It would be a big step, bigger than anything he'd done so far. But after tonight, he felt ready to take that leap. He pressed the button and typed out a message. "Hello, I'm interested in attending your next meeting. I'm just starting to explore my gender identity and would love to connect with others who understand. Is it all right if I come?" Before he could second-guess himself, he hit send. Almost immediately, a reply came through. "Of course, we welcome anyone who is questioning or exploring their gender identity. We look forward to meeting you." David let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. It was done. In 2 days, he would be taking his first real step towards understanding and accepting this part of himself. As he got ready for bed that night, removing his makeup and carefully hanging up his dress, David felt a sense of peace settle over him. For the first time in years, he felt like he was moving in the right direction, towards a future where he could truly be himself. He fell asleep with a smile on his face, dreaming of a world where Danielle could walk freely in the sunlight, no longer hidden in the shadows of David's life. The next morning, David woke up feeling both excited and nervous. As he got dressed for work in his usual suit and tie, he couldn't help but feel a twinge of disappointment. After experiencing the freedom of being Danielle, his male clothing felt restrictive, almost suffocating. At the office, Veronica greeted him with a warm smile and a knowing look. "Good morning, David," she said. "How are you feeling today?" David glanced around to make sure no one was within earshot before replying. "Honestly, a little conflicted. It's strange being back in these clothes after... yesterday." Veronica nodded sympathetically. "That's understandable. It's a big adjustment. But remember, you don't have to figure everything out overnight. Take your time. Explore at your own pace." Her words were reassuring, and David felt some of his anxiety ease. Throughout the day, he found his mind wandering to the upcoming support group meeting. What would it be like? Would the other attendees accept him? Would he feel out of place? As the day wore on, David made a decision. He sent Veronica a message asking if she'd be willing to go shopping with him after work. She replied almost immediately with an enthusiastic yes. That evening, they met at a department store known for its diverse and inclusive range of clothing. David felt his heart racing as they approached the women's section, but Veronica's calm presence beside him helped steady his nerves. "Where should we start?" he asked, feeling overwhelmed by the array of options. Veronica smiled encouragingly. "Why don't we start with some basics? A few versatile pieces that you can mix and match. And remember, there's no pressure. We're just here to explore and have fun." Over the next couple of hours, David tried on more clothes than he had in years. Soft sweaters, flowing skirts, tailored blouses, each item bringing a new sense of excitement and possibility. Veronica offered honest feedback and gentle encouragement, helping him navigate this new world of fashion. By the time they left the store, David had a small but carefully chosen collection of feminine clothing. As they said their goodbyes in the parking lot, Veronica gave him a warm hug. "I'm so proud of you, David," she said. "You're being incredibly brave, and I want you to know that I'm here for you every step of the way." David felt tears prick at his eyes. "Thank you, Veronica. I don't know what I'd do without you." That night, as David carefully hung his new clothes in his closet, he felt a sense of rightness settle over him. These weren't just pieces of fabric. They were the first tangible steps towards becoming the person he'd always known he was inside. The day of the support group meeting arrived, and David found himself standing outside the community center, his heart pounding. He'd chosen a subtle outfit, jeans, a loose blouse, and minimal makeup. He wanted to present femininely, but he was still working up the courage to go full Danielle in public. Taking a deep breath, he pushed open the door and stepped inside. The meeting room was warm and inviting, with a circle of chairs arranged in the center. A few people were already there, chatting quietly. A person with short blue hair and a friendly smile approached him. "Hi there. Is this your first time?" David nodded, his throat suddenly dry. "Yes, I'm new to all of this." "Well, welcome. I'm Alex, they, them pronouns. We're so glad you're here. Why don't you grab a name tag and write whatever name and pronouns you're comfortable with today?" David hesitated for a moment before writing Danielle, she, her, on the tag. It felt both terrifying and exhilarating to see it written down. As the meeting began, David listened in awe as others shared their stories. Some were just beginning their journeys, like him. Others had been living as their true selves for years. Each story was unique, but there was a common thread of courage and self-discovery that resonated deeply with David. When it came time for him to speak, David's voice shook slightly, but he found the words coming easier than he'd expected. He talked about his years of secret cross-dressing, about his recent outing with Veronica, about his fears and hopes for the future. As he spoke, he saw nods of understanding and encouraging smiles from around the circle. For the first time, he felt truly seen and understood. After the meeting, several people came up to chat with him, offering support and resources. One woman, a transgender woman in her 50s named Grace, took him aside. "Danielle," she said warmly, "I just wanted to tell you how brave you are for taking this step. I remember how terrifying it was when I first started exploring my identity. But I promise you, it gets easier, and the joy of finally living as your true self, it's worth every moment of fear and doubt." David felt tears welling up in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. "I'm still not sure exactly where this journey will take me, but for the first time, I feel like I'm on the right path." Grace squeezed his hand. "You are, and remember, you're not alone. We're all here for you." As David left the community center that evening, he felt a profound sense of belonging. He'd found a community, a place where he could be himself without fear or judgment. Over the next few weeks, David's life began to transform. He started attending the support group regularly, each meeting bringing new insights and strengthening his resolve. At home, he spent more and more time as Danielle, reveling in the freedom to express his true self. At work, he confided in a few trusted colleagues, including his boss. To his relief and gratitude, they were supportive, assuring him that his job was secure no matter how he chose to present himself. Veronica remained his staunchest ally, always ready with advice, encouragement, or just a listening ear. She helped him navigate the complexities of makeup and fashion, celebrating each small victory with him. As his confidence grew, David, now increasingly thinking of herself as Danielle, began to consider more permanent changes. She started researching hormone therapy and consulting with doctors who specialized in transgender healthcare. The day Danielle took her first dose of hormones was both terrifying and exhilarating. It felt like the true beginning of her journey to become the person she'd always known she was inside. Months passed, and slowly but surely, Danielle's body began to change. Soft curves appeared where there had once been angular lines. Her skin softened, and her facial features subtly shifted. Each change brought a new wave of joy and affirmation. There were challenges, of course. Some friends drifted away, unable or unwilling to understand her transition. There were moments of doubt and fear, times when the road ahead seemed impossibly long and difficult. But for every setback, there were moments of pure joy. The first time she went out in public fully presenting as Danielle, her head held high. The day she legally changed her name and gender marker. The moment she looked in the mirror and truly saw herself. Not David pretending to be a woman, but Danielle, finally whole and authentic. Through it all, Veronica remained by her side, a constant source of support and friendship. And as Danielle grew more comfortable in her new life, she found herself thinking back to that night at the restaurant, to Roman and the connection they'd shared. One day, about a year into her transition, Danielle was having coffee with Veronica when she spotted a familiar face across the cafe. It was Roman, looking just as handsome as she remembered. For a moment, Danielle hesitated, but then, bolstered by Veronica's encouraging smile, she stood up and walked over to his table. "Excuse me," she said, her heart racing. "I'm not sure if you remember me, but we met about a year ago at an Italian restaurant. I was with my friend Veronica." Roman looked up, confusion flickering across his face for a moment before his eyes widened in recognition. "Danielle?" he asked, a smile spreading across his face. "Of course I remember. You look amazing." Danielle felt a blush creep up her cheeks. "Thank you. I've been through some changes since then." Roman's smile grew warmer. "I can see that. It suits you. You seem happier." "I am," Danielle said, feeling a surge of confidence. "And I was wondering, is that offer for coffee still open?" Roman's eyes lit up. "Absolutely. I'd love to hear your story if you're willing to share it." As Danielle sat down across from Roman, she felt a sense of everything coming full circle. A year ago, she'd been too afraid to accept his invitation, too unsure of who she was and what she wanted. Now, as she began to share her journey with this kind, interested man, Danielle felt nothing but pride and joy. She was finally living as her true self, open and authentic, ready to embrace whatever the future might hold. And as Roman listened with rapt attention, his eyes warm and accepting, Danielle knew that this was just the beginning of a beautiful new chapter in her life. A life where she could love and be loved as her true, authentic self. A life full of possibilities she had once thought were beyond her reach. In that moment, sitting across from Roman, with Veronica smiling encouragingly from across the cafe, Danielle felt a profound sense of gratitude. Grateful for the courage to embrace her true self, for the friends who had supported her, and for the bright, open future that lay ahead. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other socials if you want more wonderful content, early access, behind the scenes, and more. All links down below.